Do you constantly seek approval from others? The whole idea here is for us to start looking at our ego and being able to understand if my ego is healthy and mature or if my ego is unhealthy. Hello, divine being. This is the True Self Talk that happens every Tuesday and Thursday, where our goal is not to bring more absolute truths, but rather to open our perspectives so our questions can change. I am Ela Morello, and this is the episode number 65 called I Love My Ego, starting from the beginning. What is the ego? The ego is that guy that a lot of us pretend we don't have. We try to put it under the rug. We judge people because we say, oh, that person has a huge ego. You know, you start looking at books and then there is this huge thing saying ego, the enemy. The word selfishness and selfish in Latin language, it's called egoísmo, egoísta. It comes from the word ego. And who wants to be selfish? Who wants to hear that you are a selfish person? No one, right? So that's why we try to pretend that we don't have the ego and so on. So the idea of today, the talk of today is I want to bring you a new perspective about your ego. Okay, what is the healthy ego? And what is the unhealthy ego? You know, if we didn't have ego, we will not be able to manifest anything in this reality. Okay, so it is important. I hope by the end of this talk, you can say, I love my ego. Obviously, the healthy ego. It's important that we understand that our problems with this word and the misconception of not understanding about our ego is what makes us being so limited, is what doesn't allow us to grow, to become self-aware. What happens is, imagine a car. If everything is how it is supposed to be in our journey, your ego would be sitting in the passenger seat and your true self would be the one driving your car. But what happens with us is most of the time, our ego is in the driving seat. And that's when we are limited, confined, and we cannot find peace, we cannot find happiness, and we feel all this negativity in the world. Why does the ego exist? And what is our healthy ego? The healthy ego, it's simply and only the executive aspect of the self that organizes the game plan. So the function of the ego and the healthy ego is to simply organize, meaning it chooses our intentions and assembles energy for us to accomplish them. Let me give you an example. If you decide you want to go back to school, so this is your intention, you need your ego and a sense of self-worth in order to take the steps to go back to school. For example, gathering funds, making time to study, mastering the material. Talking spiritually right now, the ego is really part of our human aspect. Just like our body, which is this vehicle, the ego is gonna die here in matter. The ego does not exist in eternity. It does not exist in our soul. The ego actually creates separativeness, limitations. We live in a reality that is dual, right? So in order for us to perceive hot, we need to understand cold. In order for us to see light, we need to understand dark. So we separate things. And this is part of human experience. The ego does the same. And that's why the ego dies when we make the transition, right, to another realm. So, if we need the ego and the ego is part of us, we are being invited to actually look what is my healthy ego and my unhealthy ego. So basically, to be easy for us, you already know what the healthy ego does. The healthy ego organizes. It is the executive of the game plan. And what does the unhealthy ego is? We're going to go into a little bit more deep into this because I want to invite you to open a couple of perspectives. But before we start, I have wrote down a couple of questions for you to test the strength of your ego. Is your sense of self consistent and strong? Yes or no? Can you stand your ground when challenged? Do you have a positive regard for yourself? What is the current level of self evaluation based upon? Are you comfortable differentiating from others? Are you true to your own individuality in the face of pressure? Are you overly focused on your own issues or needs? Do you constantly seek approval from others? The whole idea here is for us to start looking at our ego and being able to understand if my ego is healthy and mature or if my ego is unhealthy. We want to transpose the unhealthy ego and we want to strengthen our healthy ego. So it's important that we have the understanding that we need to work for our consciousness. This is not something that is going to be given to us. So let's talk about now the unhealthy ego, okay? And what are the tricks the unhealthy ego uses on us to stay separate and limited? Imagine like this. I like this analogy. We all need a house, right? It's important to have a consistent and beautiful and harmonious house. However, we don't want to be confined in that house. It's important that we have an ego, but it's important that we are not confined inside the walls our ego builds in order to separate and limit us. Okay, so the idea of the unhealthy ego is for us to be able to catch that our ego is unhealthy and transpose that wall. Outside is where the true freedom lives. The main tricks that the ego uses, by the way, every negativity that you can perceive in humanity, it is a trick of our ego, of our unhealthy ego. And I want to put them in, sum them up to be easier for us here into three categories, which is going to be pride, fear, and obstinacy. So let's talk a little bit about the tricks of pride, how the ego tricks us with our pride. We know that it wants us to feel separated. And why? If the ego feels separated, that means it exists. If you transpose the ego, the unhealthy ego, it ceases to exist. So your ego is going to do everything in its power to keep you there. So regarding pride, have you ever felt I'm better than you? When you look at someone and you look and you say, you know, I'm better than that person. Or I need to prove to the world how good I am. I need to outperform others. My interests are different from other people's interests. Whenever we are falling for this trick of our ego, that is pride, it's always us against the world. And this inevitably creates a separation and also a feeling of superiority and inferiority. Because if there is some times in your life, you know, that let's say any situation where you look at your parents or a friend and you think you know better, and even if you don't say anything, deep inside of you, you feel, I know better than you. This causes a feeling for you of superiority. And let me tell you something, this is an illusion. Because every time, as we talked, we live in a dual world, right? In a duality. Every time we are capable of feeling superior, we are also gonna feel inferior somewhere else. And how do we feel internally? How, when we feel inferior, when we feel less than others? Just so we know right now, this is a trick of our ego to maintain us separate. If we really go deep within ourselves, it does not take too much to understand that actually, whenever we think we have different interests from people, the interests are just different in the surface level. At the end, we all want the same things. We all want to be loved. We all want to be part of something. We all want to accomplish something. So we are not really different than others. If you start hearing familiar problems, family problems, or the issues that make people feel anxious, at the end, just change the address and the name of the people involved in that situation. But the feeling that the human being feels, it's really similar. Another thing that the trick of the ego regarding pride has is the tendency that we might have to live on appearances. By the way, everything that I'm telling you here probably is unconscious. Okay, we do that so much for so long that we're not even aware of it. That's why I'm trying to put light into it so you can start asking yourself these questions. Because every feeling that we are feeling, all the ego's tricks, talks about the negativity we see in the world. So, whenever we live for appearances, because you need to prove something to someone, or if the person sees you in that way, then that person is going to love you more, blah, 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 goes actually in the opposite street, in the opposite path of your self purification, of your true self. Because whenever you live worried about the appearances, you're not being true to your own real feelings and interests. We start saying yes when we want to say no. We are not able to set our limits. Or, on the other hand, we are the opposite extreme. We don't accept anything, we are inflexible, and so on. Also, regarding pride, there is a tendency for us to do everything in order not to feel ashamed. And this is part of the illusion that ego causes on us. Whenever we allow our unhealthy ego to be the driver of our life, we truly take all of these things at heart. So we don't allow us to be authentic. We don't allow us to feel what we feel. We overvalue whatever opinion others have to about us. We feel ashamed of things. And we start using masks because we want to hide whatever we are ashamed. Whenever we have a healthy ego, meaning that one that simply organizes, literally, if you do something that in the beginning would feel ashamed, literally, you're going to sit down and laugh with people about it. You're not going to feel ashamed because you have not to be proving nothing to no one. You don't have to be in the pedestal. You understand you're allowed to make mistakes. So, how do we want to live? When the ego is not driving, literally, we live life from our authentic self without all this heaviness of what we believe we are. So the real problem is when we believe we are our ego. And then what happens? We try at every cost to not allow that ego to die because we believe that if people don't think we're superior, if people don't think we're good enough, if people, they're not going to love us, we're going to die, we're going to be alone forever. These are all tricks of our unhealthy ego. Okay, just bringing you a couple of things for you to start thinking about. I want to give you a couple of examples regarding the obstinacy that the ego, obstinacy tricks that the ego makes us fall for. Okay, so that will include everything related to stubbornness, resistance, resentment, and rigidity. Basically, all of this causes us to be confined between the walls of the ego. It doesn't allow us to transpose our ego. So, whenever we don't, let's say, forgive our parents for whatever we believe that they did wrong or they did to us, we already talked here a lot about the power of forgiveness and so on. And especially when we still inside of us, we don't let go of something. It's like trying to kill the other person by drinking the poison yourself. Because who is attached to that pain? Is you. When the ego, it's in this stage of obstinacy, it says, I am like this, and I'm going to be like this is who I am, and I will stay where I am, and there's nothing I can do about it, or, oh, I can't change. This is a trick of our ego that limits us. We truly believe that we cannot do different. No, it's not that we cannot, we don't want to. It's different. So everything that doesn't allow you to be flexible and open to change has to do with this trick of the ego, because it believes every change can be dangerous. And in reality, it is dangerous for your unhealthy ego. Because when you realize that and decide to change, because it is a decision, your ego will die. And that's why it plays so much tricks on you. Also, that people that have all the absolute truths and are not flexible to learning new things, to open perspectives, and so on. This is also causing you to stay still. It doesn't allow you the true freedom. True freedom is not doing whatever you want whenever you want. That's also a trick. True freedom is about consistency. It's about knowing where you're going and doing the things that you need in order to do that. That's true freedom. It's not simply wanting pleasures without paying prices. The last trick, the last side things of trick that I want to talk about today is about fear. And whenever our ego plays this trick and make us afraid, this includes, like, it makes us feel restlessness, anxiety, apprehension. And when we are afraid, when we are in that state, we are confused. And our anxiety and restlessness deprives us from what? From what we truly want, which is happiness, peace. What are you truly afraid of? So basically, the ego is terrified of dying. The other day I read a quote. I don't remember exactly the quote, but it said like this: the human being is funny because it doesn't ask to be born. And then when it's alive, it doesn't leave, and then is afraid of dying. The part of us who is afraid of dying is our ego. Is that one that knows that will die here. As I told you, the ego does not exist in the spiritual realm. So the ego is afraid of death, and especially is afraid of death within life. If we analyze our life, how many cycles of dying and reborning you went through? And every time that hurt, that pain that you felt, that attachment, that resistance of letting go, is your ego confined in that wall, believing that you are gonna die if things change. That's why transposing our ego is one of the biggest spiritual work we are doing here in order to self-purify, because we need to be aware of the tricks that is doing to us in order to be able to transpose those walls. Beautiful. Now we understood why the ego is afraid of life, why we so many times fear change. And this is the sickness of our soul, of our ego. Because whenever we are afraid of allowing life to die in order to change, because the only constant in life is change, we are taking the true life away, our resilience, our authenticity. We are going further and further away from it. What is the wrong way to deal with our unhealthy ego? Pretending is not there. Being unconscious that is there. Being so much, because this is just reinforcing the ego. When you look at me and you say, I don't have an ego. I don't have an inflamed ego. This is just reinforcing the identity of your ego. Take a step back and say, I'm going to look at you in your eyes, beautiful ego, and I'm going to love you because I'm going to allow you to be a healthy ego, and whatever is unhealthy, I love you so much that I'm going to transpose you. I'm going to free you from your own walls. That's the idea here. The right way for us to start working on our ego, to start loving our ego. Just like when you look at a child and you feel compassion for that little being that is learning something. The invitation is for you to feel compassion, to look your ego into the eyes and feel compassion for it and say, it's okay. I see you, I understand you, I'm gonna work on you, and I'm gonna transpose you. And that's how I'm gonna love you. The invitation is for you to start asking questions to your ego rather than telling yourself, you cannot feel that. You should not be selfish. You should be better. You should be better than others. If not, there is no space for you. This is feeding your unhealthy ego. The invitation is here, yourself. Whenever your ego talks to you, you're going to listen and say, why do you want to be better than others? First of all, I know comparison is an illusion. And I know that my unhealthy ego is trying to strengthen itself. So now that I'm aware of it, I'm going to ask myself, dear ego, why? Do you believe that if that person is accomplished, you cannot be accomplished? Let me tell you something. There is a space for everyone. It's absolutely ignorant for me to compare myself to the other. Don't worry, we are not going to die. We're going to open our perspectives, our walls. This is how the invitation for you is. Observe the ego, talk and ask the right questions to your ego. By the way, journal about it. That's the invitation I want to give you today, which is we're going to write down how we're going to start being intimate with our ego, the healthy and the unhealthy. Let's start giving voice to our ego and not simply reacting from our unconscious. How are we going to do that? Well, just the example I gave you. You're going to get a notebook, whatever, a journal. It's important that you write down. And whenever, let's say, you realize that today you're like, I felt a victim of circumstances. We are allowing the negativity of others, right? To say how we are going to feel. You were able to grasp, I am feeling a victim of circumstances. Life is not fair, blah, blah, blah. You're going to write that down. Right under it, you're going to talk from your higher self. You're going to talk from this other part of yourself that is beyond the walls your unhealthy ego creates. How you are going to change that sentence? I create my own reality. Nothing happens to me. Things happen for me. This is just one example. Another one. Let's say you realize during your day, whatever you're doing, that, oh my God, I feel I live in scarcity and there is never enough because you realize you were afraid of something. Remember, what are the main tricks the ego use on us? Fear, pride, and obstinacy. So because you were able to look at that and realize, oh wow, okay, I'm feeling afraid that it's gonna miss, that I'm gonna live in scarcity, that is not enough. Write down. You're talking to your ego. Your ego is talking to you. How you respond to that? I live in abundance. There is always enough. Abundance is the natural state of my being. Me believing that I am confined in these walls and I can only be what I identify with right now is an illusion. So you write down, you start rewriting the story you tell yourself. Another one, a big one for the ego, as I said, it is afraid of dying, right? And we understood why. So if you're able to catch this one, whenever, usually it's easier for us to see this one when we have someone that we love that is close to death because it's old or is sick or whatever it is, and we are there like not allowing, truly not being open to perceive death in another way because it hurts. It's normal, but that's not the talk of today. But let's say the ego tells you, I am alive temporarily, and that's scary. And we know why the ego does that, because the ego will die here. Then I invite you to write down, I am alive temporarily in this plane, in this matter, with this ego, and that's awesome. I can reinvent myself every second if I allow myself to change and to move. Another one you can catch from your ego. I am in competition with the world. You need to be able to allow your ego to talk to you and tell yourself the truth. And then what are you going to respond to your ego? There is no need to compete. I am in harmony with the world. Whenever your ego tells you, oh, it's complicated, it can't be done differently, you're going to answer, I'm happy because the source of my happiness does not come from the outside. So, in order to finish this talk, I want to tell you that I know that this is not something, it's going to require work. That's why I started this live saying we don't become illuminated by imagining figures of light. We actually self purify by looking at our shadows. And I know every little topic and example I brought in today, obviously you're going to have more difficult with some of them, maybe some of the others you don't even feel, which is completely fine. We have different levels of feeling those emotions, even though we all feel those emotions. We all humans. What I want to invite you is not to say it's gonna be hard or not hard, because it depends on you. It depends on me. My invitation for you is to start observing this part of yourselves, doing the internal work, understanding that, okay, I have an ego. Everybody has an ego. Great. I want to love my ego. So let me understand how I'm going to transform my unhealthy ego in a mature ego. And every breakthrough you have, every small breakthrough, I can assure you, the feeling you're going to have, it's like beyond explanation. Because you might look at this sentence and this exercise that I invited you to do, and believe, oh, this is just some positive thought again that people are saying think positively. This is not what I'm inviting you to do here. Because if you just simply think positively, and you don't go into the depths of your being, in this case, we're talking about the ego, trying to understand what is communicating to me. My ego is afraid of what? My ego is trying to make me is pride because my ego has obstinacy because in this little and simple exercise where you allow your ego to talk to you. For example, I'm a victim of circumstances. And then you replace that with a positive and truth affirmation. In reality, you are doing the work. And I can assure you that when you do the work and not simply think positively, because this has nothing to do with that, your life changes. And why? The walls that your ego built around you start opening up until one day that you are able to transpose that wall. Just imagine a prison. If you are inside the prison, all you know is what you have inside there, what it is for beyond those walls. If we are still here, you don't know. But if you do this exercise of understanding how to love your ego and transform it into a mature ego, you're going to be able to go beyond that wall. And what is there, I cannot tell you because I'm doing my work. And every time I open a little bit more of that space, I feel something different. I feel something, higher energy. All those mental prisons, those emotional pains, they are not there anymore. So, what I'm inviting you is be curious of what is outside the walls that your ego built around you. Make that bridge, transpose that wall, because there is where we find happiness, peace, and everything in life that we all desire. Our desires might seem different only in the surface. Deep down, they are all the same. If you have any questions, if you have any insights when doing these exercises, please share with me. I am here for you. We are in this journey of evolution together. Everybody in their own path, doing the internal work, and I want you to know that I'm here for you. If you like this video, please be an agent of the spreading of light and share it with people who you think can also benefit from these insights. I am because we are.